that makes me think of a question that, surprisingly, you haven't asked yet. You could have asked it after the first minute of this conversation. What is the prevalence of albinism? How many people with albinism are around the world? It's a tough question. Yet it's a very important point, because in any of our activities, and particularly when we conduct some advocacy activities, data is key. And the first question that we are asked by whoever we're talking to, governments, the UN, is how many people do you represent and are affected around the world? So if you look into the literature for decades, the figure that that was used talking about the world prevalence of albinism was 1 person out of 17,000. And you know, as I got more and more familiar with the albinism scientific literature, since 2010 I've been reading so many papers. I came to wonder where that figure actually came from. And eventually, by doing the job that researchers should have done, I've come to the conclusion that it's not reliable. It's been mistakenly repeated, cited over and over. Interestingly, that figure comes from a study that was conducted in the 60s in North Carolina in schools for the blind. And there, so they had a population of children with albinism. Half were of European ancestors, and the other half were Afro-Americans. And they combined the two prevalences of those two groups and came up with 1 out of 17,000, which was only the prevalence of albinism in that population. So school children in visually impaired schools in North Carolina in the 60s. Soon it became the prevalence for the entire country, for the albinism population. And who knows why? A researcher who was not very professional turned that figure into the world prevalence of albinism, interestingly. So thankfully, there was a paper that was published, I believe last year or a couple of years ago, that made things very clear. This figure, 1 out of 17,000, should no longer be used. It's obsolete. It's not correct. And among the many other facts that are stated in this article, you will read that there is no such a thing as the world prevalence of albinism, because it varies from one region to the other, from one country to the other. There are regions of the world where the prevalence is higher, regions where it's lower. And there are many countries for which we don't have numbers at all. Starting with my own country, France. What's the prevalence? There's no study. There's no statistics. We don't know. So based on a few studies run here and there in Europe, in Africa, and interestingly, actually the most accurate recent studies were conducted in sub-Saharan Africa, African countries. In countries where, thanks to some very effective advocacy conducted by albinism organizations, we managed to have a question about albinism added to the national censuses in those countries. So we have very accurate data for those few countries. But basically, what we know today is that in the lack of more comprehensive studies, in a European country, there's an estimate of 1 person with albinism in 12 to 15,000 people. In a sub-Saharan African country where there was no particular study conducted, that prevalence ranges between 1 in 4 and 1 in 7,000 people. And that's all I know. There are many countries where we have no idea what the situation is.